I know, but I honestly, tomorrow's gonna be balancing the person again. It's nice.
Are we there yet? Oh. Does that say, we're beyond 3 o'clock, aren't we now? Okay, so we can start? Is that okay? Does it all look good? So let me welcome everybody to a session of the Design Review Panel. I'm Joe Lopko, and I'm not typically the chair of this panel, so I'm going to count on my colleagues and staff to point out where I've mucked up and do my best to adjust. Thanks everybody, including the proponent team, for coming. Today is about 23 Toronto Street. It's a zoning bylaw amendment, a draft plan subdivision application, as well as first review. We've allocated 1 hour and 25 minutes for this review. It's a formal review session and a vote will be taken at the end. Staff have been given 15 minutes for their presentation, and there'll be a 15-minute presentation from the applicant to follow. And after that discussion, this session is being live streamed on YouTube, also being recorded. So there will be the recording, I'm guessing, is available in due course. Malia can tell us when that'll happen. So I'm going to begin with a roll call and making sure who's here. Noticing that Paul Coolidge's just not in the room. Again, I think he's just down the hallway if anybody can try to get him in here. But Jim, may I begin with you? You're just if you could let me know that you're here and whether you have a conflict or not. I'm here, no conflict. Okay, Demon? Heather, I know, is not here. Jim Melvin, I'm here and no conflict, Jim?
Here and no conflict, Joe.
Thank you, appreciate that. Ralph, are you there?
I am here and no conflict.
Thank you, Ralph. Olivia.
I'm here and no conflict.
Thank you, Olivia. And I'm guessing that Paul will be here in a minute. I think that that gives us a quorum, so we can proceed. And I'm wondering if staff can begin a presentation. Sorry? My apologies. Okay, excuse me. Thank you. It doesn't say that in my script.
It's okay, Gordon forgot it too.
Hey, Paul, thank you. You're present, Paul, and no conflict? Correct. Thank you. Land acknowledgement by city staff. Thank you.
We acknowledge the land we are meeting on today is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. It's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 of the Mississaugas of the Credit, is within the territory of District 1 Treaty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm wondering if I can ask the staff team, I'm not sure who's going to speak on behalf of the staff to make the presentation. Wonderful. So 15 minutes starts now. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana. I'm here to designer for Mrs. Potting. I'm here with Georgia, Heritage Planner, and Planner. So this proposal is for a mixed-use development with retail, commercial, office space, and with about 825 units. There are 3 heritage properties on site: the York County Courthouse, the Consumers House Building, and the Truck and Door Company.
This proposal is located between Adelaide Street East, Toronto Street, and Ford Square. It is within.
Hi, I'm Georgia Cush, I'm Senior Heritage Planner. So this site is located within the St. Lawrence Neighborhood Heritage Conservation District. And this area was prioritized for Part 5 designation because of the significant development pressure that threatens heritage fabric and character. And the HCD plan is now in force. Next, please. So this area contains built landscape and potential archaeological resources that reflect the evolution of Toronto from the original 10 blocks of the town of York to the present day, and it is actually one of Toronto's oldest neighborhoods. Now, this HCD isn't just about a collection of heritage buildings, but its value also lies in the network of streets and lanes, parks and the public squares, and the views, and all of which collectively contribute to the value of this district. Now, this proposal affects a site that Juliana has indicated contains an important collection of heritage properties. Next slide, please. So first we have 55 and 57 Adelaide Street East, and these properties contain a third York County courthouse dating to the mid-1850s. Originally, it was designed with a central pavilion, which you can see on the top left, and an east and a west wing. And the east wing was demolished in the 1940s, and the west wing on the right side there remains. And it was taken over at some point by the Consumers Gas Company. Building at 25 Toronto Street, which is the corner building on the bottom left. It's associated also with the Consumers Gas, and it contributes to the physical character of the district. And then finally, we have on the right side there, 17 to 19 Toronto Street was built for Consumers Gas Company, and it displays integrity in its Italian-made architecture and the quality of its materials. Next, please. So what's somewhat unique about these properties is that the rear of those buildings is also very important in their interface with Courthouse Square, and that reinforces their three-dimensional integrity. But we also have to consider the impact on the district as a whole. So there are a number of relevant policies in the HCD plan that the applicant has to address, but I've highlighted a few of them here. So new construction on a contributing property must be physically and visually compatible with and subordinate to the property's heritage attributes. In addition, there's a policy that requires additions to contributing corner properties shall conserve the property's historic importance in defining the corner and the intersection. So we have to consider whether or not the proposed placement of the tall tower on these heritage resources presents a subordinate intervention when viewed from the public realm, including from Courthouse Square. Another key policy is the conservation of the three-dimensional integrity of buildings and the conservation of rural properties. So these heritage buildings are unique in that they're not just street wall buildings. They're valued as whole structures because they're back wall space onto Courthouse Square. So this policy strives to ensure that all the attributes of these properties, the walls, the architectural details, the elements, the spatial organization, as 3D structures are conserved in order to provide a sense of wholeness and maintain integrity. And finally, the final policy highlighted here is that new development must minimize the loss or removal of heritage attributes. So these are just a few of the relevant policies that the applicant must satisfy.
A bit more about the context. The site is located between the Toronto, St. Lawrence area. It is within the mixed-use area 1, where we expect to have density. Expected. Zooming in a little bit of the property, the site has a unique characteristic because pretty much there's no pier. Site space in Adelaide and Toronto streets, but also Ford Square and Courthouse Square. Just going to briefly comment on ground floor. You can see there's a lot of things happening. There's a retail commercial space facing the square, as well as loading space. Here at the north, there's a new block connection and internal massage being proposed, as well as a retail space As you can see here, the proposed tower massing is concentrated on 25 Toronto. Here's some images showing the existing complex, the upgrade. You can see here that Toronto Street has a different context from highway being a smaller private street. The BIA has a public realm master plan, and they see Toronto Street, Court Street, and Court Square as special streets that would potentially have like spatial legal treatment. Some other images of area, street, and Court Square Park. You can see Court Square Park, Courthouse Square Park here. The park was designed by Janet Rosenberg Studio. The park may have seen better days, but it's an incredible, important piece of social infrastructure in the area. I think it's important for the kind of to see there is a proposal for the development of neighboring sites. 15 Toronto is just south of 23 Toronto. There's an active rezoning application for a tower. Rendering image of the proposal, and I think it's relevant for the context is that there's also loading to be proposed to be accessed to Court Square, and as well an extension of the lobby. As it was may have noted, this proposal is a tower that is due to the property line. The north facade is going to be mostly blank with just small window openings. There's still going to be 20-meter separation distance between them. Zooming out a little bit, moving back into the planning policies, sites located in the downtown and central waterfront areas. It is a mixed-use site, and it is within the financial district. There's a series of urban site guidelines that we refer to when we're analyzing applications, and like to just mention the top of the guidelines and the growing. But the top of the guidelines, when you see the relationship of the towers to the window and the space there. This proposal is a fairly tall tower. It's really important to understand how this project will relate to Toronto's timeline. And the official plan, there's a series of views that are important for Toronto's timeline. And I placed some images here showing 23 Toronto in relevant official plan views. These are from the Toronto Islands. As you can see, it is a very enormous timeline. Another view is from the Portlands, from 23 Toronto, from the Rivervale Park. And another thing that is important to take into consideration is that maybe an official protected view is how the 23 Toronto the proposed design will relate to the existing St. James Cathedral. We do have policies protecting St. James that it's not at this angle, but it is, I think there's an understanding that this is a very important heritage beauty in Toronto, so understanding that relationship is very important. And finally, those are the three questions that I would like to think about today. How does the building design fit within the local context? One, as the city's skyline. How does the proposal present a subordinated term to the heritage resources and is sensitive to HCD in general? How does the proposed design expand and enhance the particularly Courthouse Square?
That's it from the staff? Thank you very much. The proponent team, 15 minutes. And maybe you could introduce yourselves and the members of the team that are either here or online. And then by all means, I'll start a timer in a minute or two once you
Thank you.
introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Sam Dufault, I'm a principal at SVN Architects and Planners. Here is our team, Jonathan Tinnick, who is online here, Dennis Rakoff, so at SVN, and together with Sharon Hong and Annie Church from ERA Architects, who participated in the design from a heritage perspective, and also Danny Downg and Roy Gao, who is online on the ownership. Okay, we good?
Go ahead. I'll give you a warning at 1 minute left.
Okay, so I'll get straight in. As mentioned, the site is at the corner of Adelaide Street East and Toronto Street. The site area is 0.6 acre, about 2,500 square meters, and facing Courthouse Square. Our project engages with the two very distinct features of the site. First, it is within the dense downtown mixed-use area, intended for growth and surrounded by high rises. And second, it is a very significant historical site with significant buildings, with a history dating back from the pre-Confederation era. More specifically, we are located in the St. Lawrence neighborhood HCD. Under the 5 properties that make our site, 4 are contributing, and including 2 that are landmarked, the former courthouse and also the consumer gas building. This is how it looks today. I think that's been covered, so I'm not going to explain too much on this, but courthouse on Adelaide on the bottom left, then the wing in the middle, 55 Adelaide, corner building, 25 Toronto, and turning around the corner, the only non-contributing corporate property, which is 23 Toronto Street, in the middle of the bottom, and the consumer gas building, the southern property. So given this context, the project's key objectives are 1, to retain the heritage building, 2, to enhance the public realm, and 3, to deliver new housing. So our approach has been really driven by heritage. So I'll let my colleague Sharon to give us more details.
Thank you. And also thank you for the land acknowledgement. So just to maybe clarify to focus, it is a very significant heritage site dating to pre-Confederation of the built heritage of the city. But the focus of this site has really been about that built heritage, and engaging with the Indigenous heritage of the site has not yet occurred, but definitely able to do so as we continue to progress on the project. So the site is, thank you, is situated on the original reserve lots for the civic infrastructure of the town of York, immediately west of the original 10 blocks of the town of York. The courthouse, along with St. James Cathedral, St. Lawrence Hall, and North Market are remnants of this original civic plan of institutions in the town of York. The third York County is 57 Adelaide Street on the jail reserve, and it was built in the 1850s. It is one of the original civic institutions of Upper Canada. Courthouse Square was used for civic and religious gatherings. It was even the site of public hangings. The early beginnings, 7 met in the courthouse building. The site is also associated with Consumers Gas, which has occupied the site since the 1870s. They were responsible for modernizing and illuminating the Victorian era city. And of course, finally, considering the site's history in establishing a vibrant public realm as it frames the upper terminus of Toronto Street, which was one of the great outdoor rooms in Toronto's high Victorian period. Toronto's founding district has seen contemporary revitalization efforts, including work on St. James Cathedral, St. James Park revitalization, including the newly reopened St. Lawrence North Market. The courthouse district and square hasn't had the same reimagining since the 1970s Janet Rosenberg design, which is the present opportunity of this redevelopment project. The heritage strategy was informed, of course, through understanding the lattice work of heritage policy that Georgia walked us through, as well as understanding the built form evolution, how the site evolved from the jail reserve and into the fabric of the commercial financial district of Toronto today. Of note, that west wing of the courthouse, 55 Adelaide, had a significant fire in the 1980s and was almost entirely reconstructed at that time. So the redevelopment is anchored by a heritage podium, bookended by whole building retention of that original 1850s courthouse building and the Consumers Gas building at 17 to 19 Toronto Street. Courthouse is largely untouched. The Consumers Gas building needs some alterations to the rear elevation at the ground floor for loading. And then facade retention of the West Wing and 23 Toronto, wrapping around the corner of Adelaide and Toronto streets, including the restoration of lost elements like the parapets and creating accessible entrances.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Moving on to the urban structure. So in addition to the heritage building strategy, we want to better integrate the project to the urban context. So on the back of our site, there is Courthouse Square Park. Small, but historically significant park, a bit hidden, not in great condition relative to its maintenance today, and also primarily faced with back-of-house function from the adjacent buildings. So there is also an existing network of lanes around that area, but a very unique urban structure. So there's an east-west connection shown in blue here from Yonge Street to St. James. And there is also a north-south lane from King Street to Lombard Street that is somewhat incomplete. So one of the big moves here is to propose a mid-block connection from Adelaide to the park. And you can see on the right where that would take place inside the building and create a new entrance door, so to speak, to the park. And really the intent is to make it more visible, more activated, more connected. It's the entrance from Adelaide, from 55 Adelaide. So for the massing, the core of the project is to very, very carefully place and integrate a new tower on top of the historical base at the corner of the site. And we are working on a very tight site. So this careful placement considers the following. One, we want to maximize the distance to the property line of the south, 20 meters, and to the east, 21.9 meters. In other words, to allow our site the separation distance needed for other properties potentially developed. And two, and most importantly, is really also maximize the setback at the corner from the tower to the way it meets the lower historical base, right? And so to really try to keep the reading of the kind of lower historical base. There is an element of transition from the tower above to the way it meets the lower existing building, a few steps in to maximize this step back. 7 meters along Toronto Street and 7.5 meters along. Very early, but generally also into the expression, contrasting approach to material, a more kind of glassy addition, and a more kind of masonry-based existing structure. Program, this is a mixed-use project. We are proposing a one-to-one replacement of the non-residential program on the site. So 2-level of retail commercial and office space above. And that includes the lower portion of the tower as office space. And that what delivers that one-to-one replacement, right? Above this, the residential tower, a total of 833 units, a third of which are family size units, so 2 and 3 bedrooms. The ground floor, in terms of the organization, we want to maximize the active frontages on all sides. So the retail and commercial program along Toronto and Adelaide already exists, right? So we want to maintain that. 23 Toronto, which is a non-contributing property, it's going to be redone. And this is where the new residential entrance and also entrance for the office lobby will be located. For the consumer gas building, the bottom here south, it is maintained, but we are integrating a loading area facing the back. We're internalizing that loading, which is an enhancement from today's open bin that are in the lane. There is also a new retail fronting Courthouse Square, you see in pink at the bottom. Note that there is no car parking in this project. Mid-block connection, north to south. It is intended to be a flexible commercial space with public passage throughout the block. So it is a conditioned space that will be open during the day and usable year-round. So maybe a winter patio for Tironi and so on. It's programmable and connected to the adjacent retail. 57 Adelaide is going to be retained as is. Quickly on the basement, to note that the landmark properties, we're not touching the basement foundation. We're slightly kind of reprogramming it, but the excavation of the P2 and P3 are exclusive to where the tower is for backup house function, waste room, MEP, bicycle storage. The podium, that's office replacement. We're maintaining 57 Adelaide. The podium roof is now programmed. This is the outdoor amenity for the residential tower, and it's connected to an indoor amenity. The tower floor is very rigorously organized around the central core and the structural element. It is 794.5 square meter in footprint and maintains its size both for the office and the So altogether, 88-story building, mixed-use base and residential. Moving on to public realm, we are following the recommendations of the St. Lawrence BIA public realm master plan that was developed a few years ago. And the three key recommendations, so I missed one, fine grain connection, I mentioned the mid-block connection, that's what this is. High quality streets and unique public space. So for the streets, we are grading Toronto Street, proposing a crosswalk curb extension at the edge to facilitate the pedestrian crossing and also create a pickup and drop off for the new entrance, and repaving with concrete pavers. On the park side, really the goal is to transform the back house condition that exists today. And we hope that our project will be a catalyst to change that condition. And the way we're doing this is by internalizing the function of the building that is today open and lane, by adding that mid-block connection, that new entry point in the park, and also creating a new active frontage. Right, we are proposing an 88-story building. We do understand that it is a significant contribution to the Toronto skyline. I think in terms of its expression right now, we are seeking simplicity, a simple extrusion. And also highlighting the rationale for this. So it is really a unique context for height for a number of reasons. One, we are in the downtown area. It's a unique site. It is a project that requires and deserves a very substantial financial investment going into the retention of the district buildings. And that needs to fit within an economic model. And there is no site really like this surrounding us. We have very, very limited possibilities to add density on the site. Yet we are still giving the separation distance for other adjacent property to develop. And lastly, we also try to maximize housing, 833 units.
1 minute? 1 minute? Is that enough?
We have
Or we
taken,
can go a little longer.
I'm almost done, thank you. We have taken a careful look at the shadow studies, especially in relation to the St. James Park. And we know this is very sensitive. So there is no new net shadows in March, September, or December on the park. That's why. There is new net shadows on the park for 3 hours in June from 3 to 6 p.m., 3:18 to 6:18. But we've tried to kind of quantify this a little bit differently. So this is the kind of bar chart, which is the cumulative time, the park area.
Apologies.
I don't have to have another 5 minutes.
Yeah, you should. I'm sorry about that. Apologies.
So this depicts the cumulative park area that is in the shadow on June 21. So the existing condition today in the park, 6% of the area is in shade. If our building were a 63-story tower, which is the same height at what is being proposed south of us, 15 Toronto, right? That's the same height. We would add 4% of net new shadows in June. And at 88 stories, which is what we're proposing, which is the graph on the right, it's an additional 2%. So in total, 6% cumulative park area in shadows during that time, meaning that during the day, 80%, 88% of the area of the park is in the sun. Last slide about the sustainability, I'll go quickly. The intent is to comply with the TGS Tier 1, maximizing also density where it belongs, meaning that it is in a walkable location in the downtown. We have 0 on-site vehicle parking. In terms of the upfront carbon, adaptive reuse of heritage structures, minimal structural transfers, which is simplicity of the form, minimal basement, because we have no parking mostly, and in the energy efficiency aspect, compact building form, high performance envelope, we're targeting a low window to wall ratio, no balconies that would reduce the thermal bridging, and we are still investigating the best system really to heat and cool these buildings. So that's thank you.
Thanks very much. So let's shift to questions of clarification from the panel members. Can I look to those members online? Ralph, I see your hand up. Ralph, and then Dima. Go ahead, Ralph.
Can you go to the plan, site plan that showed the other developments? Apologize. But, this one. No, that one. This one. Couple questions. Well, we know that there are 2 applications, the 63-story tower on Adelaide and the 56-story tower development. Is the proposed mid-rise development that is fronting Church Street, it might be a question for the city, but maybe the applicant ask, is that an application? And then the question I have, this proponent is, if you were hired, I mean, you probably don't want to answer it, to develop a building on that site, are you supporting a mid-rise, or would you potentially say that that's a high-rise site as well, using your rationale on your existing, your application?
I think that's a question for the proponent, Ralph.
Yeah.
So to my knowledge, there is no current application on that, what's indicated as the potential mid-rise, right? That's correct, the proposed application.
So you place that mid-rise footprint there?
Yeah.
Hypothetically, but why mid-rise and not a high-rise tower there?
Where did that idea come from?
Yeah. Jonathan, do you want to weigh in that?
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. So we, just for background, we had a different block plan for the site that identified a potential tower site further to the north along that block. This was before we saw the application for the 63-story tower adjacent to us. So at this point, we're kind of guessing a little bit in terms of the appropriateness of that 63-story tower there. If it was approved, like from our perspective, we meet the tower separation distances, obviously taking that distance entirely onto our client's site. If that's approved, that mid-rise, that site there would likely be mid-rise only because the tower separation distances would be very difficult to meet while still providing some level of setback. There's quite a limited sort of corner-to-corner condition there. So we've assumed again at this point, it's probably a mid-rise, but we're guessing a little bit in the sense because we're guessing at the appropriateness of the 63-story tower that's now been inserted. So we're shifting our block plan as we go a bit, but that wasn't the sort of approach that we provided in our initial block plan.
Does that answer your question, Ralph?
Not quite, but I can appreciate it if you're putting a 750 meters
Okay.
footprint with that separation, but we have two smaller footprints that are going 63 and 56 going through the system. So,
So save that for a comment, Ralph.
yes.
Okay,
Well, what-
Olivia, you have a question? I'm sorry, Ralph, do you have another question?
No.
No. Olivia, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any further information in terms of the design of the mid-block connection that you can provide. Is it intended to be open or closed? Is there any sort of activation or programming going in there?
Yeah, sure. It's a conditioned space, so it's closed. It can be used year-round. The intent is that it's open during the day and accessible to the public. And I think there is an element of programming that we want to imagine. And again, whether it's a kind of winter patio for the Toronto restaurant or a coffee shop or something that kind of activate that space, I think that's the intent there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Olivia, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Jim Melvin, I think you've got a hand up.
Yes, I do. I have a question. Could you go to page 32 of your presentation?
What
Page 32.
It's the public realm.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll do. You've got graphics on Court Street and Toronto Street. What is the public realm contemplated for those two streets? Are they being closed to the public, or what does that graphic mean?
So I just want to first clarify that this plan is from the BIA, right? It's not ours,
Oh,
right? But we are contributing to the goal of the BIA Public Realm Master Plan for the part that is on our property. Yeah.
To be a little bit more direct about the intent there, as we understand it from the master plan, that there would be a special paper surface applied to all of Toronto Street and Court Street and the surroundings of Court Square Park. So we are adding that to our streetscape on our site so far, anticipating a future redevelopment.
oh, okay. So you are endorsing a street texture change in.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Dima.
A few questions. One, in terms of constructability, that's a huge tower you're building on a very small site. Is the intent for the corner property to be dismantled so that you can build it, or will it be retained in place? I'm just trying to figure out, like, there's the intent to keep the facade of the corner property.
Yeah.
Just from, No, how do you do that? Building a huge tower on that site, so what is what is the constructability? Has that been looked at?
So the corner property, is a facade retention, right? We know.
No, I get that.
Right.
How do you even retain the facade on site, given the size of the lot and the limited access at the rear and the side to actually do what you're.
Yeah.
Has that been?
I think we're very early in that process. And I think we definitely need to consider that. Yeah.
My other question is, if there's an intent to have programming across 25 Toronto and onto Toronto, the consumer gas building.
Yep.
You're programming the vertically the building, you're programming it horizontally. How do the floor plates align? Because some of your graphics seem to indicate that the floors do not in fact align. So how are you addressing that alignment with horizontal programming rather than the vertical?
Yeah, sure.
So within the interior, there are level changes within 23 and 25 Toronto that negotiate between the heritage properties. So consumers' gas floor levels are maintained. Yes.
Because these floors are maintained, right, in the landmark property, and that is the datum from which we're working.
And just the last question in terms of whole building and potential, which I actually appreciate. For the consumer gas and the loading dock that's coming in the back.
Yeah.
That is able to fit into the property without having to actually, if the heights work, then you can actually fit it in without having to do full floors and sold.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry, I'm taking up time, but last question for the city. When we were working on plans for the park, there were a lot of no-nos about additional shadowing onto the park. This may be a city question, shadowing on the St. James. How is that figuring into this, even if it's just 6% additional shadowing? Are there policies not allowing additional?
We're still highlighting this. There are policies. It's limiting shadow. It has been very difficult to have reduced applications to use those chances on the basis.
And I also want to clarify that it's net new shadows is for June.
That's great, David.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Any other, yes, Paul, sorry, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about some of the amenity spaces in the ground floor, commercial offices. And a couple of things I noticed you've got a kind of big tower amenity space.
Yeah.
So the community or outdoor. What's the character of this, the mid-block connection, the lobby? How does all of this kind of support community? Yes. What is your sort of take on that in town?
Yeah, I think there is the world of the base, and that's more public, right? That's what the intention behind the mid-block connection, the active frontages, access, and so on. And I think what's above this, it really belongs to the residential tower. So really the amenity that we see here on this slide, both in Orlando, this is intended to be for the residential program at this point, just because also the requirement to deliver a certain amount of amenity that is for the residential.
No detail yet. Perspective
For the amenities?
Any of the amenity or the commercial spaces that it's like generic.
Oh, right. Yeah, I don't think we've done all the work on it yet. Yeah. I mean, it is today in this building an office space for the upper floors. And so the intent is to provide the cinema space to replace that. And that's the extent to which we've
Okay, thanks, everybody.
I just want to add to you guys responding about your constructability questions. And as part of the terms of reference now for HIAs, we do have to engage an engineer to provide a statement of feasibility. And so they confirmed that to be able to retain, that they're able to accommodate retention structures to go through the existing windows and doors, and a strategy to, in terms of flow will fill at the basement to support lateral stability during the construction and making sure that whole building conservation is not. So they have stated that there's a strategy that is feasible. Yes, so we're going with that.
Thank you, everybody. So I think we shift now to the panel members' commentary. And we have 6 panel members present. I'm going to suggest the order as follows. Ralph, appreciating your deadline, but I think, just to let you know, Ralph, I think we should be completely done, including voting, by 4:30, just to let you know. But I'm going to suggest Dima, if you're willing to go first, Ralph, if you're willing to go second, Jim Goff, Olivia, Jim Melvin, and Paul, if you would finalize. Go ahead, Dima.
Thank you very much for your presentation. This is a very interesting site. It's at a real, almost the entry point of going into what the St. Lawrence Market neighborhood is. It is a site that retains a lot of the original character and heritage character. And I have to say, for the development, I really appreciate the whole building retention that's being proposed for the buildings. I'm going to retain a respectful skepticism as to the strategy, because I think I've seen too many times in projects that is the intent. When costs come in, all of a sudden, whole building retentions end up getting eroded, and I would really push the city and you to really push that whole building retention, particularly the consumer gas building, which I see being the one that is most at risk in this development proposal, in terms of when it actually goes to construction and when you actually have to, the costs come in of how to actually do this on a tight site. And I think it really is essential to the character of the building and to the character of this neighborhood that we are looking at full building retention for both the courthouse and the consumer gas buildings. In terms of the overall character of what's being proposed, and there's a question about, is it subordinate? Does it fit into the neighborhood? I appreciate the setbacks, or the step backs rather. Where I'm a bit challenged is the how busy the tower is on top of these buildings. It seems to be doing a lot. In terms of the change of character, like the initial, the double step backs at the base, and it comes out, then it comes out again. The office character, the other step back, and coming up again for the residential. I understand sort of the desire to articulate the office character different from the residential character, but it feels it becomes, in a sense, it's competing too much with the heritage buildings, and the concept of subordination is not so much size or scale, it's leaving the heritage buildings to have their own strong presence on the street, so they're still understood as what they are, where the full building retention comes into play. I think the way this is built onto each other, it's drawing too much attention up and maybe away, and it looks like too much of the stacking block going all the way up. I mean, I think other people are going to say a lot about the height, which feels a lot for this site. It also feels a lot with respect to downtown. This isn't a financial district, office tower. This is a residential building. The feasibility, the quality of life of having such a tall residential building downtown, impact on the number of people, number of amenities that are available in the area. I appreciate the no parking. It's wonderful for a downtown site, but it feels very tall. The skylines of the city showed sort of out of place in the bump that is the financial bump, kind of bump, that extra bump that's happening towards the park and towards the St. Lawrence neighborhood. It's doing a lot of work. As a last sort of a general comments about the park and around the courtyard square, that's going to be quite busy. Like I like garbage going inside, clearing it up, making it neat. But looking and considering one-way circulation, like reorganizing park circulation so that it's less congested, it's more clear in terms of the parking. I think it's been alluded to, but having some kind of idea of what's happening on that site, a block plan would be really helpful. It's to say it's gonna be in the drive, I think anybody, even the stress in that neighborhood, that feels, that's nice, but I think having a larger development, understanding how that block as a whole is going to develop, especially with how 3 towers on that tight site, and I'm at like 25 meters ideally the setback, so we are under, and your apartment block is at almost 800 square meters, so I don't know if there's a look at gaining a bit more space by tightening that as well. And I think the shadow on the park, it's nice to say it's only been adding 6% a few months of the year, but it's increments and increments and increments and increments on a park that is so important to the neighborhood. Like we're losing a lot of our like great public space. That's what I was saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Ralph?
Okay, so if there wasn't any heritage on this site, I could completely understand there's a tall building that potentially can sit on that site. So then on top of that, putting the heritage, which is an incredibly ambitious project to retain 2 significant buildings and a facade of a 3rd and 4th building. So I commend the team, very, very skilled architects and landscape architects, to what I think is an incredibly well-planned approach to placing a tall building on this site. I know very well the courthouse building intimately, and you know, I'd say that that patio, which that photograph probably even does it justice, is the courthouse square desperately needs a reimagining. It is a constant battle right now with servicing a forlorn people that are basically living in that square, trying to mingle a fortress now patio to make for a kind of more interesting animation on that courtyard. The courtyard, the courthouse is a very strong back, not really engaging much in terms of its connection to the interior. So I think that a complete reimagining, somewhat like the BIA is proposing, is incredibly important and may also help, I think, the constructability of this building, where that could potentially be a staging area given the fact that the square may get reconfigured, redone. The cut through, again, I think it's incredibly important for this, all the reasons I just talked about, to try to engage that courthouse park, courthouse square park. The convertibility, I guess, is a kind of conversation, a question of publicness, not public. But I do think that it could be the most fantastical mid-block connector, even if it is only 1 story high. I think that the idea of engaging, if the intent is to maintain a hospitality use in the courthouse, that could help, I think, animate that space, as well as, I think, the additional new commercial that is fronting Adelaide could actually connect. I think you're showing that. Don't quite know how the sections all work there, but I'm pretty sure you can deal with it. I do think it's incredibly important. I know that there's a kitchen there and all this stuff, but all that could be kind of dealt with to help create a really fantastic mid-block connector that I think is essential, I think, to kind of assist, I think, the public realm conversation that an aspiration that you've set. But the challenge with the height, again, you know, I have no problem with height. I want to say that outright. I think that the reason I brought that question up was the fact that you're getting this height makes those two smaller buildings more economically viable. So the idea that a 750 square meter tower or mid-rise, I think is a bit of wishful thinking, given the fact that if there are two other sites that you've just created value, that there's going to be another tall building. So it will be a four tall building block in some ways. The reason I'm talking about the collection of these towers is I think the impact on the park, I'm going to just leave it at others to talk about. When you accumulate all this height, will be interesting to see the impact on St. James Park. I think Courthouse Square Park is a shadowy space. I think it's wishful thinking. We love it now because there's a parking lot where that 750 meter mid-rise building is sitting, and as soon as even a mid-rise goes in, it'll be a shadowed park. But again, that doesn't mean that it won't be an interesting experience. With regards to the massing of the heritage and impact of the building, I really like the mass of what is, I think, that office form. I appreciate it because it is a slick, neutralized, objectified form that I think has a conversation with the heritage buildings, rather than what I call a messy architecture of residential, of operable windows or French balconies or whatever the assembly of facade that is required to support a residential program. The office is a much more neutralized one. I really wish it was more of an institution. Like, I can just imagine it being an art gallery, a private art gallery, or something that sits and floats above the heritage building, creating a really interesting relationship. Where I struggle with it is the reveal floors, the two-step reveal floors of amenity. And I really strongly urge you to kind of make that a more simple form, because right now it kind of gets it more messy reading between the heritage and the object, the office object. I'd love it to just be a little bit more just straight up and be a pure reveal. I'm hoping from a livability point of view, I just don't think you have enough amenity for the amount of people living in this building. And I question the third floor office program and wonder if you can just make a more robust residential amenity that connects to the two-story reveal floors above it, which I think then offers wonderful opportunity to connect in a much more robust way, an amenity program for the residential. I still want to support the idea of the other amenities floors that sit further up, because I do like the way they break up the mass. Otherwise, I really like what I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate it. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the presentations. They're very informative. I too really appreciate the effort to retain the heritage buildings. They're very important structures, I think, in reminding people of the Toronto that has gone by largely. You really do have minimal opportunity regarding public realm changes here. So it's good to see things like the curb extension and the pedestrian connection through the building. And hopefully that will support the park in a more profound way. Also, the proposed pavement material change, I think, is going to be particularly important in kind of weaving the park space together with the buildings around it and making it less vehicular. And as Dima suggested, a one-way lane operation around that part would certainly help to simplify things and minimize conflicts. I support the provision of zero vehicular parking, given the proximity to both transit and employment in the area. And as a lot of other people have said, I think this should be a real opportunity to reimagine the function of that park. Just go wild. Like, what else can this park be? Rather than just kind of a typical little city like that. Do something really inventive to bring people there and make it more of an amenity for the whole area. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Olivia.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for the really great presentation. I agree with other panel members. I think there's a lot of positive aspects here. The retention of the heritage buildings, of course, it sounds like such a challenge, and I really appreciate the work that has gone into that. And I think also the mid-block connection, this sounds like such an exciting and unique space in the city. I think the design of this space is going to be really critical, and the commitment to a level of design is going to be really important to the success of this project. I'm a little bit troubled, I think, by the shadowing studies on the park, and I know this has been mentioned a couple of times. Even though it's only a couple of hours, it's sort of like hours in the middle of the summer, in the mid-afternoon. These are sort of critical hours when we all want to be outside, and I appreciate the sort of diagram you did showing. I think there was like just a 2% improvement with the lower tower. I don't know how that translates. If this is like half an hour, we're impacting like half an hour for thousands and thousands of people. So that does sort of add up. In terms of sustainability, I would just mention that super tall towers are extremely onerous in terms of embodied carbon because of the structural requirements that are needed once you start to go above 40, 50 stories. So I think there's just a level of acknowledgement. Yes, we are retaining buildings, which is great, and I hope this is precedent setting. I think because there is this aspect of heritage, it's going to be a complicated story. And so I just challenge you to acknowledge how complex that story is and sort of tell both sides of it, because we have to do that in order to advance as an industry. And then my final comment is bigger than this project, and this is sort of to the city, but what I see coming along with beautification is perhaps gentrification, and this is a little bit of a gritty block and neighborhood, and I think it is just needed to acknowledge that and understand what is needed for the more vulnerable populations that are there right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Jim Melvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, guys. That was excellent. I'm gonna confess up front, and everyone knows this. I am not a fan of people living 88 stories above the earth. And the reason for that is I believe people will exist up there. They won't really live. And when I look at your floor plates and I see 11, 12 units per floor, that's making the spaces even more unlivable because they're smaller. So I think a review of maybe 8 units per floor would be more in line with giving people a little more livable space. As we know, there's no balconies on these units because of wind. So I think there's a review of how many stories that would that's an economic argument that you guys will make. But the other thing, and where I'm going to echo Ralph a bit, is with this tower and the proposed other towers on this block, it's not the sunlight I worry about on the park. It's the number of users and the amount of park space. It is imperative that this development, that the city get on side with the pedestrian priority zones for Toronto Street and for Court Street. Those are very important to make the success and the livability of the space. With all of these people, they need places to get out of the building too. I commend the work you've done with the heritage buildings, and that you've kept them in 3 dimensions, and you have Ralph is correct about that pass through out to Adelaide. Those are all excellent ideas. Redo of Courthouse Square is The other thing we need is a place for dogs to piss. We dogs come with all of these units, and that's another attack on our environment. We need to be able to, like, you've probably got on the rooftop of your amenity space, you've probably got the dog area that you need for the dogs to do their business, but you don't have any space for people to do their thing. So I would encourage that part of this development includes the pedestrian priority zones as outlined in the BIA studies, because I think those are very, very important. That would be it for my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, Jim. Paul.
Great. I just spent a little bit of time flipping through the work we did on the downtown tier 4 study. And then we did it. And we tried to thread the needle there about how do you actually accommodate tall buildings but still maintain quality of life? It shouldn't be a kind of either or piece. And there was 2 chapters at the very end. We spent a lot of time talking about the usual shadows and things like that. And 2 chapters at the very end that didn't make the cut, but one was really actually workshopped into mixed-use flexible design. But it was actually the part that I think is relevant, and the problem is we can find a way to implement it through policies. Everyone's going to need step backs. And there was a chapter that kind of talked about the disconnect between these kind of filing cabinets of humanity and then the kind of 2 meters per square foot that the bylaw has, and then it's like you figure it out. And I'd like to say, yes, you can do livable 80-story buildings. That would be great for families. There's millions of people in the world that live in those conditions, but we need to provide the amenities that support it. And that's kind of where leading question started, is sort of how do you've got 80 stories, 10 units, 8 units, 2,000 people. It's a small village, right? So you should have a school, a cemetery, a playground, a daycare, a church, a Protestant church, a Catholic. And so we don't do that anymore. But what are those third spaces? So like, where do I go if I want to pee? How do I? The distance to a park is not from the lobby; it's from the 18th floor, 10-minute ride down, and then 100 meters to St. James. So I think we really need to start thinking about it in those 3 dimensions. And I think the design team you have is particularly adept at dealing with that. But it has to be intentional. And so just saying we get the office because it's the office replacement. You met the policy objective, but how does it support the quality of life of not 2,000 people that live here, but the 100,000 that could be passing through there every day? And there's great revenue potential in it too. And so, there's some examples just to kind of not make it so abstract, but like in Toronto, it's the TIFF-like box where you can bring the public up to the 3rd or 4th floor, and then you've got kind of communal spaces on the roof where the residents come together, and those two start to imagine merge. It's the Daphne Cockwell building at TMU, where you actually go in as a resident through 5 floors of public space. And then you catch a second elevator lobby, which is a residential lobby. And so there's tiers of privacy. And, Singapore does a lot of that as far as kind of the public spaces or the green or communal outdoor spaces at higher levels. Look to those for examples. They're not totally different. So invent the version that works here. Bringing it back to earth. Look at the Plum, Seattle, look specifically at residential buildings, because they're incentivized as developers to provide the amenities that bring people in. We're so fixated on a condo market where it's like pro forma works, we go and then rent out the CRE to a nail salon. People walk away. I don't think you guys can do that. This is obviously the commitment to heritage speaks to a value. So how do you craft and curate that experience with whatever it might be, the food halls, the incubator spaces, like North York Building's got a thing like that, that's revenue generating, it's community building, it's also creating economies and supports city policies, whether the daycares and clinics, and like just an office is not 20 people come in, they go for lunch, they go back, but uses that generate multiple visits throughout the day that create a that big block connection where adds life to it. And then starts to create those social bonds, hopefully, that are maybe not easily imagined in an 80-story building, but entirely possible. So I just challenge you to look at those blue and pink areas on the lower 8 floors and rest them.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. Thanks everybody for your comments today. I'm going to just do a very brief review of what I think I just heard from the panel members, and urge panel members to let me know if they think even afterwards, if they think I've missed an important thing. Lots of great discussion, I think, with this application. And first of all, a big thank you to the team and proponent for reaching out and coming for this early dialogue. Just kind of organize comments into a number of categories. First of all, with respect to the public realm, I think what we've heard today is, this is one of the most incredibly important historical sites of the city. It once played a much more important role, I think, in the public life of the city, and there's an opportunity to make that happen again. And the team and the city team, the developer team all seem focused on that. The BIA has already laid some groundwork, so there's lots to build on. And I think one thing we've been hearing about is how to make Courthouse Square useful to this incredibly, to this community that's really intensifying. So some form of, I think, substantial revitalization to that public space ought to be a consequence of this collection of projects. One other theme that I heard coming out was, and appreciating from the proponent team and the staff team, this is not the only development interest on the block. There are at least 2 other tower projects. I think Rolf predicted there might be 4 in the end, including what you're proposing. And so I think another theme where city staff has a lot of good experience and has a lot of good outcomes in the past too, is facilitating a block planning process. I don't know how that can be managed here, but this is a classic kind of situation where pulling the neighbors together, the community interests together, and figuring out how the fine grain of this comes together will be really key. So I think that message on block planning and working with the others that are part of it is important. I think one thing I would say, I'm hearing a lot of observations and commentary today about consideration of what the neighbors are up to. So that's a really important aspect of building a city together, and that seems evident in the way that you're coming across. I think the attention to heritage and full building retention is, we've heard how incredibly important it is. The development teams, it seems to be very sensitive and on top of how much value that part of the project brings to the rest. It's the kind of definer of the project. And just a small aside that I think we've heard a couple of things about how the architecture of new elements ought to be related to the richness of the heritage. And that idea of being a bit, I think Dima's term was, thank you. Yes, and so there might be some more work to be done in that regard, though. I also appreciated Ralph's comments about using elements like, an office, kind of the neutral approach of an office to kind of distinguish from the heritage. And it's kind of part of the strategy that Dima was describing. I think with respect to tower form and architecture, you heard some commentary on this. And beyond the topic of height, which brings lots of things, One thing I did not hear, but I will just add to the mix, is how the building meets the sky. Didn't come up a lot. I find the current proposal a bit underwhelming, let's say, in that regard. The aesthetics of the tower, to me at the moment, do not meet the ambition of the project. I'm not suggesting it should be flashy or any of that sort. I'm just, the architecture it's, let's say it's in early days. I think one of the other big themes here, which is both a staff comment and a proponent comment, which is, we've heard it from a number of folks, is Paul, just most recently, is look at how many people are coming here, not just in this development, but the other ones that are already here. So how do we make this a great place to live? How do we really and more comprehensively deal with community amenities, community facilities? How do we in fact understand the community resources, social and community infrastructure necessary to support these populations? I don't think either on the city staff side or the proponent sides, just generally, not just this project. I think we've got a lot of work to do collectively in that regard. I loved the thought about allowing that kind of whole podium to just become a kind of giant community resource. And I think you have hints of that in what you intend already. I think you're hearing a lot of support for the absence of parking, but caution about how you achieve sustainability goals for super talls. We've seen a few applications for super talls. One other thing, but what often is missing is the sustainability aspect of the super tall, and it sort of comes along later. As Dima points out, it can be really fundamental to your choices and can really impact how high you really want to go. We've seen so many examples of we want 80 to 90 stories, and the reality sets in after a period of time, and those projects become 40 to 60 stories for some very good reasons. One of the things that I would ask the team to think about, which I don't think very many super tall developers are doing, but we need some pioneers, is tower resilience. I know there's this assumption we will have energy forever, it will not be interrupted, we won't have 2 or 3 day power outages. I think 2 or 3 day power outages are in fact realistic and far more common eventuality that's going to come. So how do you, I think part of what Paul and others were getting to is, can we think about more creative ways to think about vertical living? How do we bring communities together in a way that supports vertical living and providing more program and richness in that regard, but also then, elevators, what are the vulnerable points with respect to sustainability? How do you weather either in the deepest, darkest part of the winter or the hottest part of the summer? That's when you will have a need for a resilient building. How is that coming into it? And one other, I think, important theme, Jim Melvin in particular pointed to this, and I think perhaps others, is unit size. How many more small units does the city of Toronto really need? I think I'm hearing in the news about this glut of small units on the market. Nobody wants, they're trying to be sold, nobody wants to buy them, nobody wants to rent them. We've got probably enough small units for the rest of 2 generations down the road. So I think a suggestion to reconsider the kind of housing that you're delivering, both to make it more marketable. We need to get over this investor mentality and how we're doing things. So, that was another theme, I think, that came forward. But generally speaking, I think a lot of positives were acknowledged and identified, and appreciating its work in progress. Wishing everybody here best of luck in moving it forward. And with that, I think we need to vote. Right. Okay. Yes, I should have done that sooner. My apologies, Maria. So I haven't done this before. Maria, do we have to put something on the screen about what the vote means? Okay, you're doing it. And while Maria's doing that, there is a vote which gives a sense of the panel's impressions of the project, either to support the project or not support the project in terms of its basic concept, appreciating its work in progress. There are also an option to provide conditions to support. So I'm going to just start to ask if any panel members have any conditions they want to apply to either support or non-support. And if I don't see any hands going up, and I don't, I'm going to assume that's not the case. So I'm going to go through the order of speakers. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Yes, I'm just a little ahead of, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think the question of amenities. Okay. And as well, I think the expression of like a tower, maybe the expression of the tower we've contemplated that, but I think the amenities and the idea of like sustainability, resilience are two really, they're fundamental to this building being worked for and being actually a proper 88-story residential. That's a strong enough thing to put a condition on it.
May I just ask, are you thinking that with the strong advice about much more of an examination about expanding and enhancing amenity space, the approach to sustainability and resilience, that those would be conditions of support for the project moving forward?
So like, and I think there's opportunities, like I'm just looking at their office level, maybe it's a comment, but the office level, I mean, it's not, that's gonna be hard to rent. An office, like with all the sheer walls, it's not typical office space, and it's gonna be quite difficult to rent. So there's a lot of opportunity in the building to actually shift the programming and shift the thinking. And refining expressions of power, so it's not quite so rich. But I think there's opportunities there, but I feel like the amenity question, the community question are so fundamental to the ambition of this project that I feel, I guess in my sense, I feel it should be. I don't know.
But the condition is simply that those topics require a lot more effort for the project to be successful. Yes. They're not there yet. That's right.
Statement that we all.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to make a suggestion?
One condition is pending a deeper resolution of the amenity spaces that support living. Too broad, but
yeah. Pending more of a resolution or more of a development and expansion of thinking about amenity space.
And sort of tower livability context of.
it's support.
Yeah, in support of tower.
In support of tower livability. Yeah. Okay. May I ask anybody online if they have any comments about that condition from DEMA?
Mr.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I would add to support that the pedestrian zones for what is it, Court and Toronto Street be attached to this proposal, and that it's a robust pedestrian priority zone.
Right. Okay. So that's a second condition I think I'm hearing Jim state. Appreciating everybody on the panel, we know that all of the comments that are stated get into the minutes. So, you know, we don't need to make every comment a condition, just to say, and not to suggest that you guys are doing that. But may I just ask if we could then proceed to a vote? Yes, go ahead.
Just devil's advocate, is that a second condition something not necessarily we, but the city planning can hold people to? Right.
The pedestrian zones being transformed.
Yeah, just because they're.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't proceed on their own schedules and.
Yeah, I don't think we want to support the development necessarily conditional on that. Right, we strongly endorse that idea, I think.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be a.
It's Ralph here. The public, again, it's not the proponent's responsibility to improve the public realm, but I do think the city has to be able to voice, given all the services that are going to come onto that back, that mid-block connector is essential. That there has to be some, I mean, I think that's in the minutes maybe, but not for a support, because it's hard to ask the proponent support if the city's got to deliver a new courthouse square park, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I could suggest, thank you, Ralph, that what I've sensed both from the proponent and city staff, there's a lot of work underway, a lot of thinking already done about improvements to the public realm more generally. Through the mid-block connection, I think seems unanimously supported and developed. Appreciating, I think we all are aware of all the circumstances that have to come together to allow for coordinated block planning, coordinated public realm, design and development. So we're all on board for that. And if I might suggest that our primary condition is that our support for the project, or indicating support for the project from any panel member, would be on the condition of the project developing a much more robust approach to amenity and tower livability, as we've discussed it. So based on that, I wonder if I can start with Dima. Support or non-support? Support. Thank you, Dima. Ralph?
Support, and I just want to answer the third place question. On this third place question involves pizza, it seems. So
okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Ralph. Jim Goff. Support. Thank you, Jim. Olivia.
Support.
Thank you, Olivia. Jim Melvin.
Support.
Thank you, Jim. And Paul. Support. Okay. So we have unanimous support for the project with a condition and a lot of commentary that'll come out in the minutes shortly. Thank you, everybody, for a lot of the work that's done and the time spent this afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Session's over. Thanks, you guys online. See you live next time. Thank you. Cheerio. Thank you. That was fun. Interesting afternoon. Yeah. Different approaches. Are you listening to game messages? Or is it, is this on the
We never did that much. So not directly. For sure. It just gives everybody else's time. Yeah. It's my project.